What's up, guys? We are wrapping up the Gamerverse Abomination wave today with Abomination. So I have wrapped up all the figures that I'm going to review out of this wave, which is ultimately just the comic book figures and this Build-A-Figure. And just like Crimson Dynamo, this is one that when I originally saw him, I said, I don't need that Build-A-Figure. And then I started getting parts and I realized, oh crap, this guy is going to be absolutely massive. And despite the fact that I think he has a pretty awful head, that's not Hasbro's fault. I do think that this is a really awesome Build-A-Figure. This thing is just massive and imposing, and it does look really cool. So let's take a look, see what this guy can do. He has some interesting articulation as well. So you've got a head that can look really far up. It's a forward-facing ball peg, so it goes like juts out of the neck basically, and then he can look down. You do get some gaps going on back there depending on how you pose him, so just watch your angles really. But then he has really good tilt, like he looks all the way over. You can rotate the head, but that's not really a good range of motion. He's mostly all about turning his head side to side. The arms go out at the shoulders about that far. They do rotate all the way around. This guy though has butterfly joints, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first Build-A-Figure, at least Hasbro, right, that has butterfly joints. I can't think of any off the top of my head. I don't have them all, but that's really cool. It's a great range of motion backwards and a good range of motion forwards. He does have a bicep swivel. You've got single jointed elbows that, while only single joint, they are pretty much, just over 90. They're very much like the joints that are in the Hulk figures that we've been getting recently. So really deep cuts that help add range of motion. You've got your hinges and rotation at the wrist. He's got a diaphragm cut, so he goes sideways, he goes backwards a little bit, he goes forwards, and then of course you can rotate all the way around. Really good range there. Legs go out pretty good for such a big figure. They go out really far. Kick forward, well, kick forward that far, pop the leg off action, but they go out about that far. It's a Build-A-Figure, you're bound to do that as well. They kick backwards a little bit. You do have a thigh cut at that joint. He does have double jointed knees, and again, despite being so chunky, they do move pretty well. Surprisingly though, this guy also has a boot cut shin swivel, despite the fact that it's not a boot. You've got really good rocker range on this guy, and then he's got really good hinges down there. So he moves exceptionally well, honestly. He moves so much better than I expected. Such a massive figure to move. It's very reminiscent of those new Hulks that we've been getting. And for such a big figure, this guy is pretty crazy with his range of motion and just overall, I guess, ease of use. Now, when it comes to the overall look and feel on this guy, that's where I have, I guess, the one gripe, but that's not really Hasbro's fault. Whoever decided to model this character this way just gave him the ugliest head sculpt. I just don't think it fits. It is pretty well done. It definitely looks like the source material, as far as I can tell, but I'm not a big fan of the head. I am a big fan of the rest of the body, and I've seen some folks putting the older Build-A-Figure head on this. I don't have that, so we'll see if I can go down that road at some point. But this guy does look really good. There is a pretty solid amount of paint on him. There's different shades of, kind of browns and slightly tan yellow colors that fade into different layers of green. And you've got that basically all over the chest. You've got it on the insides of the arms here, like on the wrists and in the bicep area. The back is pretty heavily shaded as well along like the ridge line. So you've got these spikes that run down. Some of this reminds me somewhat of the MCU, well, the MCU Abomination, because he's got those spines that run down. He's got that kind of small head, but of course this is still quite a departure. He does have some pretty gnarly feet. You've got these big, what, five toes with the sixth claw, like a dew claw, like a dog has like there. So that's pretty cool. Big, monstrous feet. He's, of course, got the very telltale ripped pants situation going on, but there's just a lot to take in with this figure because of the fact he's one, incredibly large, and we'll do some size comparisons here shortly, but the sculpt on him is incredibly monstrous. If you don't know what this is, you might not necessarily think that it's Abomination. He could very well fit in for some sort of generic monster, really. The scale work on the arms is really good. The spikes kind of add a little bit of definition to him, breaks up things a little bit, and he just looks imposing. It's really about the size for me when it comes to that, in terms of his imposing nature, but a lot of the other stuff that they've thrown in here, from these monstrous claws to those weird wacky feet, really help to sell that he's just this hulking, no pun intended, beast. And then we come to the head sculpt, which I've already said I don't really care for, but it is really well done. There is a lot of work in this, from the spikes all over it to a tremendous number of little scales that are sculpted in there, the little pointy ears. The teeth are really well done, despite the fact that they're a very soft, kind of malleable plastic, and then you've got that tongue in there. So it is really well done. It very much fits and it works. It is oddly small, but at the same time, it still seems to fit on this massive body. I just think it looks kind of weird. It doesn't really strike me as a very Abomination-looking head sculpt, just based on my own comic leanings. So it is very accurate, it seems, but it still leaves a little bit to be desired just in cool factor, I think. And then, as I mentioned, so we'll do little scale comparisons because, you know, even though I don't normally do a lot of scale comparisons, this guy warrants it because of the fact that he is incredibly large. I can't think of a Build-A-Figure recently that comes this close. So you've got one of our recent Hulks here, and you can see that he is even taller than this Hulk. And I mean, this guy's a beefy, monstrous figure to begin with. So there is a tremendous amount of plastic going on here, and I think this is probably one of the best things to use as far as scale comparisons. So it'll be a good matchup for your Hulks. But then we've got, of course, some other figures. So here he is next to the most recent Captain Marvel, and you can see that he just dwarfs him. So this is a relatively standard Marvel Legends figure. And then here we go. Let's do a Diamond Select, Marvel Select Beast. So you get an idea of what he looks like against a maybe 7-inch style scale figure. Here he is with a NECA Predator. So he's pretty tall compared to that, but still kind of dwarfs him. And then, just because this is still very much fresh in my mind, here he is dwarfing one of the Ghostbusters from the Plasma series, and you can see that this is even more ridiculously out of scale than anything else. We'll just throw in Marvel again just to hammer that home of what this guy really is. So he is enormous, he's massive, he will tower over just about every Marvel Legend that you've gotten anytime recently. So yeah, there's a lot to like about this figure. Honestly, it comes down to a couple big things for me. The crazy range of motion on just about every joint this figure has, and then the size. I do think that the head is the weak point on this figure, and if you're going to go down that road of maybe swapping out a head, which does seem to work pretty well, then you probably won't have that issue. But he does look kind of goofy just in that sense, but otherwise it's a really imposing, monstrous, beefy figure. I really can't stress that enough, that this guy is just humongous, and he has a tremendous amount of size, great shelf presence, and I'm happy to finally have an Abomination, because like I said, I don't have that old one, and even though this is not a comic figure, he's definitely going to work, and he's going to scale really well with a lot of your Marvel Legends figures, and just maybe put a few of them in their place in terms of overall size. So this is definitely a fun one, even if you maybe weren't sold on him from the get-go. So that's going to do it for this look at the Marvel Legends Gamerverse Abomination Build-A-Figure. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and until next time.